But you played in the NFL, and you played for how many years?
2 years.
2 years?
You know, it was interesting because I got hurt and then I got cut. So I was just sitting on the table, icing my knee and reading books about real estate, and it really caught the bug. Real estate is supply and demand at its most basic form. You know, very few people are prepared to retire at the age of 65. Very few. I think it's like 4 or 5%.
Yep.
That's pretty sad if you think about it. You know, my mom was a small business owner. She owned a dancing school, and she was a driver. And so from a very young age, she kind of instilled in both my brother and I the philosophy, if you're going to do anything, no matter what it is that you love, you know, do it to the best of your abilities and try to live up to your potential, whatever that is. You know, everyone has a ceiling at certain things, and her idea was find that ceiling.
Please welcome to the show, Than.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Dude, thanks for coming on. So it's actually a funny story how we got you here. So I played football in an old man football league with Than. And that was the way.
It's not that old. I mean, 35. You got to be 35 or older. I think we're still in our prime.
I'd like, you know what, I'm going with that. We're still in our prime. But I didn't really know much about your background. We were just playing football. And then I was looking for some information personally in real estate. And I'm Googling and I'm learning. And I come across FortuneBuilders. And whose face do I see at the bottom but good old Than?
That's funny.
So I reach out to Than. I'm like, hey, meet me for coffee. I want to pick your brain and talk to you about this. And you were fortunate enough to say yes. And that was the start of our friendship. And I'm just grateful that you invested that time, and now here you are in the studio, and we get to pick your brain on camera a little bit.
Amazing, and I feel very much the same way. I'd heard about through the grapevine of the football that you were the founder of Everbowl, so it was really an amazing connection, and getting to see your offices here today have really been inspirational, and I think you're definitely a multifaceted entrepreneur. So I'm excited about it.
Well, thank you, but more importantly, I am so excited because, as I think I mentioned to you off air, the whole idea of the premise of the show is success formula. And you have shown success across many different walks in life. You've been a professional football player. Mm-hmm. You went to Yale, so one of the highest levels of academia you can hit. You've been a TV star, and now you've built a very successful real estate business, and you have a nonprofit, so you're also giving back.
Yeah.
There has been commonality between that, but take me back to high school if you don't mind. And you're a multi-sport athlete. You're obviously getting good grades. Mm-hmm. Was Yale always where you wanted to go? Did you have this understanding, like, I want to go to one of the most prestigious academic colleges possible? Because you also played in the NFL, which means you were thinking sports.
Sure. You know, my mom was a small business owner. She owned a dancing school, and she was a driver. And so from a very young age, she kind of instilled in both my brother and I the philosophy, if you're going to do anything, no matter what it is that you love, you know, do it to the best of your abilities and try to live up to your potential, whatever that is. You know, everyone has a ceiling at certain things, and her idea was find that ceiling. And so even from a young age, I knew I wanted to play football at a high level. I didn't know where that was going to be, and I wanted to go to a really good school. So if I could marry those two experiences, there wasn't like a set destination. It was just best football I can play at and best school I can be at. And if you can get somewhere around there, you know, that was the goal. So, you know, I was very thankful for the upbringing and the lessons she taught me. You know, as a single mother, she was working all the time, but she always took the time to really instill in us at a young age the importance of education.
Yep.
You know, and the probability of being a professional athlete is so low. But the probability, I think, of being an entrepreneur is much, much higher. And so even from a young age, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know I wanted to start a business. I wanted to do it with my friends. I wanted to have fun doing it. So those are kind of let's call it the early seeds of you know, high school and into college.
So when you went to Yale,
yeah,
here you are, and there's not a lot of NFL players that come out of Yale.
No,
so
absolutely right.
By making that choice, you, in a weird way, limited the chances, made it even smaller of a likelihood that you would make it to the NFL.
Yeah.
when you were at Yale, were you still thinking NFL the whole time, or was it I'm playing football and getting my education, and I'd love to, but I'm focusing more on my education?
In the back of my head, I always felt like if you're good enough, no matter what school you go to, you're going to have the ability to be discovered. What's limiting is the competition you're playing with on a daily basis. You go to an Alabama, you're playing against 7 or 8 future NFL first rounders on that team who are seniors and juniors. And so, the level of skill and your skill level is going to, I think, accelerate you a lot faster. But I think if you're good enough, you can do it anywhere. But you are limited. And I never really set my goal as the NFL. I said, hey, I'm going to try to just live up to my potential. And if that's college, great. If that's, bumping around in some NFL European league, great, right? I'm just going to try to ride that as far as I can and then accumulate a degree that allows me to do other things whenever that's done. So I always had a little bit of a plan B, which was just, hey, I'm going to get a great education and take it from there and have fun with whatever I do. So it was always a goal, but it wasn't the driving thing in my life. I wasn't blind to the fact that the probability of it being a career for a long time, I mean, it's so low.
Sure. And
the percentages are so low.
And I would venture to guess your peers in college, they didn't have the same goals because they're not there thinking NFL.
I would say very, very few had that at Yale, had that in their mind. They definitely, the guys that I played with had drive and wanted to be the best they could be, but it wasn't the overarching goal of why they weren't at Yale to play in the NFL.
Sure.
That wasn't, I think, in everyone's mind. A few people, had, hey, maybe, but you're absolutely right. They're there because it's a great institution, and it's the people around you that really makes that university so special. It's the classes they teach at Yale are taught at San Diego State. The same classes, but it's the environment and the people that really make that institution so special. It's just the people that you meet, from the artists to actors to entrepreneurs to people who are working on Wall Street. That mix is really unique.
Well, I think that's the huge thing that so many people overlook about college, because learning material that is available for everybody, whether it's San Diego State or Harvard or Yale or Princeton, it's the same material.
It's the same material.
2 + 2 is 4.
Yeah.
But it is the relationship capital. It's who you end up building relationships with and how you can propel that for whatever it is you're moving on in the future with.
It's just like the way you have weights at home, and you can work at home and get as good a workout by yourself as you could in elite CrossFit class. But it's hard to replicate that environment of 10 other stellar athletes pushing you to the best of your ability. It's the same materials.
That's right.
Right? It's just the environment.
That's a really good analogy. I've never used that one.
I just came up with that one. So
well
on
done.
the spot. Thanks.
Yes. So that'll be the Than Merrill analogy.
Yeah.
So after college, what did you major in?
So I was a political science major. Very, very effective for my future life.
Yes.
So.
I mean, most would think law school or politics.
Yeah.
But you played in the NFL, and you played for how many years?
2 years.
2 years. And you're done.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, like most high-level athletes, when you're done, it's not normally on your terms.
Yep, exactly right.
So now it's what's next.
That's, it was interesting because I got hurt and then I got cut. But while I was rehabbing my knee, so I was in Alabama, actually, of all places, Birmingham, I had about 6 months of just downtime. I would rehab twice a day, an hour per session. But I had all this time. And so I said, it's time to figure out what I want to do next. So I started reading books about real estate investing. And it always intrigued me because it was a profession. It was an investment, but it was also a profession, and there's 2 different approaches you can take. You can make passive investments and just use it. You can go out and work your professional career or start a business or work in corporate America and then invest in real estate. I thought, well, it's unique. If I learn real estate, I can also make it a profession and an investment. Now I have to learn one thing once, right? As opposed to starting a business and then figuring out how to invest in real estate. And I knew, real estate's a great profession because you control your own time, right? You're your own boss. Those are all things that appealed to me, things that my mother worked very hard, but one thing I loved that she did have a lot of control over time.
Yep.
And so that's what intrigued me. And I started reading books. I was just sitting on the table, icing my knee, and reading books about real estate, and it really caught the bug. I think I was looking, I knew I was going to miss football, so I was looking for something to replace it. And it did. For a period of time, it was like just consumed my thoughts and in my head. And I said, I can be competitive in this. There's a way of keeping score, very much like sports. So it was very appealing. And that was really the initial start to the business we have today.
What was the first book that you read that just lit that fire? Or if you can remember the exact title.
2 books. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And what's interesting about that book is it really gets you interested in creating passive income. And it doesn't specifically teach you how to invest in real estate, but it's kind of like a bug that gets you interested in wanting to learn more. And then I read the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And Michael Gerber had written this book. And interestingly enough, I had invested in a Mexican restaurant, which is, considered the best investment I could ever make as a young entrepreneur. And I read The E-Myth, and it was such a eye-opening book because it's all about creating systems and processes and automating your business. And I had made this investment in a Mexican restaurant that was essentially like a wannabe version of Chipotle on Yale's campus. And all the experiences that he was talking about in this book were things that I was feeling from a pain point wise running this, being involved with this restaurant. And so that book really inspired me. I said, you know what, why don't we take those concepts and apply it to real estate investments? If we're going to buy, fix, and sell single family, multifamily properties, let's do the same thing. Let's create systems, processes. Let's McDonaldize, how we run this business so we can do it over and over and over again. So we're not doing it like a, mom and pop investor who's on site doing all the work themselves or working hand in hand with the contractors. So those were the 2 books that were the biggest influence in my young entrepreneurial career, getting started from there. And then, there's been a lot of others since then, but
sure,
those were 2 monumental things that I would recommend everyone read. Third one would be Think and Grow Rich. I think every young girl or boy in high school should read Think and Grow Rich.
I agree.
I think that's the appropriate age where people will say, I get it. These are things that are going to help me beyond just going to college.
So having a lot of successful friends, and success not just being financial, but success being the top of whatever thing that they're into. That book is probably the number 1 book read by every successful person I know.
That's interesting.
And I read it as a teenager. It was advised to me by one of my mentors. I read it first time I was in high school. The second time was in college. And I have a copy that I keep actually in my backpack.
Really?
And whenever I'm really just got some downtime and I need to remind myself, Think and Grow Rich is kind of it. I mean, it was the impetus for The Secret, which became a multinational, huge success. But the concept that if you believe it in your mind and can see it, it's possible. And when we set glass ceilings just because we don't think we can do something, that also becomes true.
Yeah.
And that Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
Yep.
So that's a phenomenal book. So you're sitting in Alabama, icing our knee.
Yeah.
We're learning about real estate. We got the bug. We're gonna McDonaldize real estate.
Yeah.
But that's where a lot of people get stuck.
Yep.
Myself being one of them. I own some properties, and I majored in regional development.
Interesting.
I bought my first house right out of college while I was in law school, and I was going to fix and flip, and my timing was impeccable. It was like 2008, and I bought it just before it was so far upside down that it didn't make sense to put any money into it. But I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we all get stuck. We get the bug. We want to do this. It makes sense. What's that next step? What did you do when you were sitting there with your knee? You have the bug, you have the information or some of it, and you want to get in. How did you jump?
Yeah. What's interesting is I had the same fears everybody has. What if I fail? What if I didn't have the money to buy one property? At that time I had invested money in a Mexican restaurant, and I had probably about $30,000 left in my savings account. And so, the average price of property in New Haven at that time was about 150 to 200,000. So the first thing I did is I said, I need to have a few private money lenders, a few people that can loan money to us. And then when I say to us, the other thing I did is I found a partner, my best friend growing up. And I think the reason we decided to partner is we wanted to do something together, but I also think it helped ease both of our fears. Hey, if we're doing it together, maybe we have a higher likelihood of success than if we do it alone. It just felt better, but it was really driven by fear. We were just fearful, so let's do it together. So the first property we bought was a rental property. So total, I think we had collectively between us $15,000 that we had to put down on this property. We got some financing somehow, some way. I don't know. I still had that NFL paycheck coming in at that point. So I was able to qualify for some financing. But then we realized, hey, we're not going to be able to buy any more.
What year is this?
So this was in 2003.
So we still had stated income loans where you could just tell them you're making money.
Yeah. So I was we were kind of stuck at that point because we didn't have any more money for down payments. We had a little bit left. And so we said, hey, well, we had read all the books. We had been to a couple conferences at that point, and we said, let's just go find a fix and flip property. And our goal was for every 2 properties that we fix and flip, let's buy a rental, right? So our goal was let's fix and flip 2 deals and then go buy a rental that we're going to hold long-term. So in New Haven and every city around the country, there's distressed properties. But in New Haven, there was a lot of distressed properties, single-family, 2-family, 3-family properties. And they were everywhere. Like if you drove the city, a good portion of that city is pretty run down. And so we said, well, let's learn the construction side of the business because, these properties, we saw 2 exit strategies, which was interesting. We said, hey, if we don't create the profit we think we're going to create, we can always keep it as a rental. We could keep this duplex, fix it up, refinance it, keep it as a rental. But we really got into fixing and flipping deals. And after the first one we did, took us way too long. We worked on the job site. Somehow we ended up selling it and we made $27,000, but it was
clear at the end.
Yeah. But we had both spent 6 months of our lives collectively together. So at the end of the day, I was like, we're talking about $13,500 a piece
Over 6 months.
Yeah. And so we're saying, we better create a system to do this without us being involved. Otherwise, we're not going to really do that well financially because we were so involved in painting, demo. And so that's when the E-Myth, we reread the E-Myth again. So we have to follow this, this philosophy of, and so what we did is we started walking around Home Depot and we said, hey, let's pick our materials for our next house before we even had it under contract. So then when we meet with the contractor, we already have a scope of work. We already know what we want to be put in this house. They can just bid labor and we can not be as involved. And so it was hundreds of hours the first project, but the next project was like 60 or 70 hours collectively. And the one after that was like 30 hours of involvement and 15 hours involvement. And we just try to chip away at that time. And our kitchens, we started replicating, our bathrooms, we started replicating. We did this, the only difference was the square footage of the cabinetry, depending on the size of the kitchen, but we were putting in the same kitchen in this house, just like a new build, but these were for fix and flip homes. There wasn't a lot of new construction in New Haven, but there was a lot of unrenovated properties. And so if you went in one of our houses and we went to the next one, you go, wait, looks the same, right? And so we just tried to do the same materials in the same price points. And that's really how we made a business out of it. That's how we got scale. And that's, how we really started to reduce the amount of time we were involved in the business. And that's when it became fun. And then we were managing a business as opposed to working in a job. Right?
So what you did, and this is, I think, is so important, is that you and your partner, you figured out what the end needs to look like before you even started. And you weren't sure how to get there.
Yeah.
But you knew what there was.
Yeah.
And you started. And you work tirelessly to navigate the trail, knowing where that end is, versus how a lot of us do things, which is, I want to fix and flip a house. And this is what I was guilty of in 2007 when I bought my first one. I bought it. I want to flip it. I put all this money into it. Yeah. I had no idea what the end meant.
Yeah.
Just sale, make money.
Yeah.
But it wasn't systematized. It wasn't processized. And that's why I ventured out. And that's what I think is so critical about what you just articulated, because if you didn't have the end clearly defined, how would you know where to improve, where to make those Kaizen moments along the journey of house to house to house to house?
Yeah.
And so is it fair to say if I go to New Haven and I go through those first 30, 40 houses that you fixed and flipped, am I going to see literally the same kitchen in all of them?
Yeah. You'll see it'll look very similar, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we got a little discount on materials, so we'd switch things up a little bit, but we tried to make it as simple and as repeatable as possible. And, the lesson that really drove us, we read this in the E-Myth, and, I think of it like a triangle. I'm going to do a poor man's visual right here, but, a lot of people, when they start out in a business or they start a restaurant or they start any business, they're technicians in their business. And then eventually, that was us on our first house. We were working in the house doing the same work as a contractor. The contractors should be the technicians. Our goal is to evolve to be a manager, manage the business. And then eventually we hire a manager to run the business. And that's when we step up to the pinnacle of the triangle, which is the entrepreneur.
Yep.
So I've always had this visual of no matter what business you start or whatever you get into, you start out you have to do the technical work for a period of time, and you want to make that as short as possible. If you try to skip that step, I think you're not going to be able to communicate with your employees. You have to do the work, but you want to do the work for a very short period of time. So you learn it, you know how long it takes, you know the standard, you can document it, then manage the technicians. Manage them, make sure you become a good manager, and then eventually just replace yourself from a management standpoint, and that's when you really have more of a passive business. So that was the goal, is let's do this work for a period of a couple of years as technicians and as managers. Then let's manage it for a couple of years. And then let's hire someone to manage the whole business where, today we do the exact same thing here in San Diego, California, but we have to be involved really in just the highest level decisions, how many houses we're working on at a time, but we don't have to get involved in the materials, doing the work. A lot of times we don't even go see the properties. So it's an evolution, and I think you apply that same formula to any business. And you've done that,
yep.
With Everbowl. You've done that with other businesses.
Same formula. I'll never forget, it was actually one of the biggest arguments I ever had in my house.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I started Everbowl, having never run a restaurant, the first 4 months, I didn't leave the restaurant. I was there 7 days a week, open to close. And I'll never forget, my wife literally looked at me one day when I hadn't been home in 2.5 months, and she said, "Jeff, you're a millionaire working a minimum wage job, and you were choosing that over your family."
Yeah.
And I had to explain to her, I went into this project, if I don't learn this business that I know nothing about, I can't scale it.
You can't.
Because I won't know where the leaks are.
Yeah.
I had to do every job in the business well enough and proficient enough to where I was an expert at it.
Yeah.
So now I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And I know immediately when I walk in what needs to be done.
Yeah.
So I can train the managers. Now, fortunately, I'm at more near the top of that visual you just did.
Yeah.
But I think that's such a great representation. I never gave it any thought. But is that from the E-Myth?
The E-Myth was really a story of an entrepreneur who had started a business and got stuck in their business, right? And why this individual got stuck, because they were doing the work, and then what it takes to what's the difference between a deli owner who owns one deli and a franchisor who owns, or a franchisee who owns 15 delis, right? Systems, processes, management. And so I knew a lot of times people try to skip that technician step. And I think you have, depending on the business, you have to do that for 6 months to maybe 3 years max. You're probably doing it longer than 3 years. You're
stuck.
You're stuck. If you're doing it less than 6 months, you'll never really know, like you said, all the pain points, the leakage points. So I think you have to do the work for a period of time. Not in every single role within the company. You might have to be a server for, at your own restaurant for, 3 weeks. If you're doing it longer than that, you're probably getting stuck.
Correct.
Right. So, but that work's invaluable because you know how to then train the individual to replace yourself. And so doing that technical work, some people try to skip it, and that's why their business might flounder. Some people get stuck in it. So it's just, you got to work your way up like an elevator or an escalator to the next step and keep replacing yourself along the way. And then that's how I think you build a, scalable company or repeatable business.
So the last question I have on your fix and flip days, because I hear this a lot from just people interested in real estate, is how did you know how much budget to allocate to fix, knowing how you could possibly flip and make a profit with realtor fees and taxes and all the stuff that comes out of your pot at the end?
Well, one thing is, we both, my partner and I, have always loved economics and math, so we always felt very comfortable with spreadsheets and budgeting, and we always built it. For example, with a rehab, if we thought it was a $50,000 project and we estimated, we would always add a 10% contingency right on top, and hopefully we didn't have to use that contingency. But if the deal didn't pencil out with the contingency built in, then we passed on it. And I think we were very realistic to pass on deals that other people would have maybe bought. And a lot of times as a real estate investors, people get impatient. They get deal, hungry. I just got to get a deal done. But what happens is they end up doing the wrong deal as their first deal and their second deal. And it's not a fruitful experience. It's not a fun experience for them. And then they kind of say, well, I'm going to go into my old profession. I'm going to do my own industry. Whereas if they had just been a little more patient on the buy and looked at a few more deals and said, hey, I don't need a deal this month. Maybe if I can get my first deal in the next 9 months, that patience pays off, because then you get the right deal that pencils. So we were eager, but we were also patient, and we also did a good job underwriting the deals. And then just making sure we were doing the right deals that penciled, and all those things factor in: the realtor fees, the commissions, the contractor, the holding fees, the cost of money. So with flipping a property, it's not an overly complicated spreadsheet. It's really basic math, and just make sure you're not missing any of those line items.
Right.
But it's anybody who had any sort of high school or basic college math can work a spreadsheet on a single family fix and flip. Now, when you get in the commercial world, it's definitely a more specialized skill when you underwrite and you're looking at 5-year pro formas and predicting cash flows 5 years in the future. That's a little bit more specialized and intensive, but a single family fix and flip, basic math with the right spreadsheet, you'll be able to do it.
So the company that you and your partner, what's your partner's name?
Paul Sajan. So I have two partners. So we added a third partner. My partner, Conrad Sapilnikov, was a Yale football player with me. And so there's three of us that started this bit. Two of us started, and then we added Conrad shortly thereafter.
Another Yale graduate, part of that relationship capital circle. And so you and your original partner, Paul, that business that you guys started grew into FortuneBuilders. And what was the whole premise for FortuneBuilders? Because I think this is the most fascinating part of your journey for me.
Sure.
I think what you're doing for the community and inspiring and educating and helping everybody is so incredible. And obviously, most people have probably heard of FortuneBuilders at this point. But what was the thesis?
Yeah, so we were self-educated in the sense that to get our, we all went to college. We all graduated from college, different schools. And my partner and I went to the same school. Paul went to UC Davis. We had a great experience. But none of us were prepared to become real estate investors out of college. We're ill-prepared, to say the least. And so we learned by going to seminars, conferences, and reading books. Like, those were the three ways that we learned. And so we learned from other people who were in the fix and flip industry who were teaching classes. And we would go to anybody's class the first couple of years like, hey, we'll pick up something. And some classes were awesome. Some classes were poorly run, and everything in between, like everything. And as we were sitting in these classes, I was starting to just do the math. And I was like, this is a pretty solid business for these individuals who are doing these classes. And, we were looking for other ways to grow our business. So we were doing some hard money lending at the time as well, which is lending to other real estate investors. So we had some money that was just sitting idle in a bank account. And so we would lend it to people who were fixing and flipping properties. And so we were kind of toying with hard money lending. Should we grow that business? And we were always interested, in this education business. And we said, well, what if we marry these? What if we do a couple free classes and just teach? Let's see what comes of it. Maybe nothing comes of it. Maybe 2 people will show up. Maybe 20 people will show up. Maybe 200. We had no idea. And we said, well, the worst thing that can happen is we'll create some good relationships. We could probably lend to some of those individuals. Let's just share some of our expertise. So some of the first classes we taught, we would open up our rehabs that were in the middle of construction, and we would walk people through and just teach a class. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're fixing. And immediately we realized, oh gosh, there's a huge demand for this. Like, people don't like the corporate path. And what we realize is that there's so many different paths to being successful in life. You can go to college, get a degree, work your way, work at a job, work your way up corporate America, or you can become an entrepreneur. But a lot of the people weren't prepared to be real estate entrepreneurs. And so we said, there's such a demand from everyday people who are working a job who realize they don't have a retirement set aside, because very few people are prepared to retire at the age of 65. Very few. I think it's like 4 or 5%.
Yep.
That's pretty sad if you think about it. You're trading 40 years of your life. So we said, there is a demand here that educates mom and pop investors on how to buy, fix, and sell single-family and multifamily properties, and rent. Buy, fix, rent, and hold single-family, multifamily properties. So we started doing these classes, and people started showing up. And we loved it, because we're, when you trade years of your life trying to, you figured out how to replicate a franchise restaurant business. And when you spend that much time and you have this expertise, it's fun to share it, right? It's fun to share it with other people and see them have the same success or similar levels of success, or even smaller levels of success that help their life financially. And so we started teaching these free classes, and we said we should charge for these classes, and we should create a business out of this. And so that's what we did. We started doing 3-day, 4-day, and 5-day live training events from like 9 to 6 in the afternoon. So these were long events. And we picked a couple topics that we felt were successful to buying, fixing, and selling properties, and buying and renting properties. And so we had a couple different classes. That's all we had. The genesis of it was just Paul and I speaking for 3, 4, 5 days about what we do. We just came up with a curriculum. Hey, here's how we find our deals. Here's how we underwrite those deals. Here's how we raise capital for those deals. And we realized at some point, you can't teach everything you know about real estate in 5 days. Right. And so we said we really should have a curriculum. And so we started expanding the number of live classes. So at one point we had like 7 live classes, and they were all on different topics. One was on marketing to find real estate deals. One was on construction management. One was on raising capital. And so people started coming to these classes, and they loved them, and they were having success. And so we said, well, we need to really essentially make a curriculum over the course of a year or 2 that somebody could go through to become a successful real estate entrepreneur, whether that's just buying 2 rentals a year, or someone doing, 40 fix and flips a year, right? Or somewhere in between, a couple rentals, couple fix and flips. And so then we created a program that was a year long, that was both online classes, live classes, group coaching during the week. And we started doing events to promote these classes, and the business it wasn't overnight by any means, but it grew pretty rapidly. And we have thousands of students around the country who are now real estate investors because they went through a few of these classes, or they went through the whole program. And so it's fun. Like, we'll go, if we travel to any city, really, we could look right in our database and go tour people's projects that are doing the same thing we started doing in New Haven, Connecticut. It's fun because you have just a community of like-minded individuals who are doing the real estate business at all different levels, small levels of success to large levels of success. To some people that just took classes, got interested, and renovated their own home, right? And so everyone's success is going to be, the individual is really the X factor. Some people made it a huge business. Some people just supplement their income with a couple rentals. So,
but what I think is another layer to that, and you mentioned when you have this figured out, it's fun to help others. Additionally, it hones your craft.
Oh,
because
sure.
knowing information
Yeah.
and being able to teach information is a different level of sophistication and comfort around it. If I can't teach something, I don't know it as well as I need to.
Yeah.
And so by you guys going through that process, I'm sure it shored up your own business even better.
Yeah.
And probably made your core business before that became the education component stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm sure you went through that same experience with Everbowl where you had a few successful restaurants and then you're now going to franchise it. Well, now you have to teach somebody else to do what you did.
Yes.
And so I guarantee it made your business better just trying to dissect, okay, well, when we order something, how do we do that? Right? And you probably improve the process in order to teach someone else how to do that effectively with less time. So it was the same thing with us because what we realized is, okay, this is what worked for us, but every market is a little different from the type of construction materials to the labor costs. So we have to redevelop our underwriting calculator to be more adaptable to somebody who might be in a different market, right? So that's an improvement we made to our process for that individual who is learning in that market. We then to explain, for example, we would meet with private money lenders and we had an outline for that meeting. If we're going to raise $500,000 from an individual in an hour-long meeting, our plan was we had an outline. Well, that may not work for every individual. So we said we need to actually do a class where we role play the meeting and they hear the words. An outline may not be enough for somebody to feel confident to go raise $500,000 in Dallas, Texas. Maybe this lady or this gentleman has never raised any money whatsoever or just doesn't feel comfortable raising money. So let's create a script. So we wrote a script, word for word, of what we say, and we gave that script so they could read it. Then they could learn it, take a class online. Then they had the outline. So we developed, they also need a presentation. We had a few slides that we would use. Well, let's create a replicatable presentation so that when they sit with that potential lender, they can show them what makes them and their business and their model different. Why are they more organized with their scope of work? Why are they going to have less probability of a contractor walking off a job? Why are they going to have less probability of a contractor lawsuit? Why is a contractor going to give them a lower price versus another investor? That needs to go into the presentation. So that's a tool that they use. So we had these tools, but we needed to make these tools adaptable to somebody who was 25 years old, who had 10 grand in the bank, to somebody who was 60 years old, who had been in corporate America, who already had $500,000 in the, so how people approach the real estate business is going to be a little different based on who they are. Who is that avatar who is trying to attack the business and what do they need? And so it made our business better too, because we had to stop and say, well, what do we do in that private money lender meeting? We had this outline and we have a few PowerPoint slides, but how do we convince somebody to lend $500,000 on a project? So you kind of reverse engineer what made you successful to teach somebody else. And when you do, you go, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing that in the conversation.
Right.
I'm better now at raising money because I had to teach someone else how to do it. So it definitely makes you better. Like if you go to a seminar, everyone who's watching has been to an educational seminar. Best thing you can do while you're at the educational seminar is take notes, right? Obviously. But most people forget what they learn. Mm-hmm. So when you get home that evening, teach your girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, son, teach a mini seminar to them on what you learned that day. All right, here's what I learned that. Spend 15 minutes organizing your thoughts, put a PowerPoint deck together with 3 slides.
Yep.
And at the dinner table, do a lecture. And you will immediately, like exponentially, learn, remember, first of all, what you learned, and teaching somebody else. Now it's like in your brain, it's locked, right?
And what you're talking about right now, so I used to have this thing I did in law school because it's so much information. And I wasn't the greatest student in the world, but I was trying to graduate through law school. And so I had this, I always remembered the 3 R's. I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
And they're not all, the R's are just a way to remember. It's actually not 3 R's, but I would read it, I would write it, and I'd recite it.
Yeah.
And if I did that over and over again, and reciting it to my girlfriend, my mom, my dad, my whoever, my roommate, they trust me, they learned about tort law sitting on the couch watching football because I'm reciting something, and they're like, I don't care. Yeah. But I always tried to remember the 3 R's because what you just said, and I love hearing that even a Yale graduate is telling you how you retain, regurgitate, and use information, because people listening are going to hear a lot of what you're saying. But I want everyone to make sure that they really grasp what Than just rolled out for you. When you go and learn something, even this episode, and you're learning from Than, take notes and actually spend the time tonight to teach somebody that information, and you will retain more of it than if you just think you remember it because you heard it.
Yeah.
And then you can use it. And that's how success happens. It does not happen because someone gave you the information verbally. We're not all that able, not all of us can learn and use data like that. Mm-hmm. So fast forward a little bit to Fortune Builders today, because now you're not as much in the live classes.
Yeah.
So what's Fortune Builders 2023 and beyond?
Yeah. So the business grew. I wouldn't say the first couple of years were really pretty slow. I would say we kind of grew gradually, and then there was some exponential growth we had, and it got massive. And we were doing classes all over the country every day, every cities around the country. We were doing virtual classes in our studio on the weekends. I was flying all over the country teaching these classes along with my partners, and we were still running our fix and flip business, and we were buying commercial real estate. And then I had 2 kids and a wife, and I was getting out of shape. I wasn't doing the things that I loved, like playing basketball and football. My kids started to get to the age where they were getting into sports, and I started coaching them. And I realized when COVID hit, like many of us, our lives changed. Like we had to stop doing these live classes for a period of time. And I fell in love with my family again. I was always in love with my family, but you then realize what you were missing out on. Mm-hmm. And my partners have kids that are the exact same age. And so we made the conscious decision to make our educational business smaller during COVID. And we were forced to, number one, right? Because you couldn't do live events, or you couldn't do, and so we just transferred all our classes to online classes. So we were able to adapt, and we realized, our commercial holdings were getting really, really large. So with our commercial real estate investing business, with our single family fix and flip business, it's really the majority of, we have a few private money lenders, and the majority of it's just our capital. With our commercial real estate investments, we had investors. We have well over 1,000 investors in all of our different commercial deals all around the country. And that portfolio grew so large that we said, I don't know if we can do it all. I don't think we can balance having an education business, fix and flip, a commercial business. And so one of these things we have to consciously make smaller. And so we made the educational business smaller, and that allowed us to spend more time with our families. It also allowed us to do a better job growing our commercial real estate holdings. And we've been very happy with that decision. It's been great. And I'm getting more enjoyment personally out of my life now than I ever have. I loved working for 15 years of my life. I still love working, but I also love spending time doing the things, coaching my kids. Yep. You can't replace these years. Now, once they go to college, I don't know, maybe I'll fall back with doing another business. But right now, the balance is good.
Yeah.
Good. I still work a lot, but we have a much better balance.
Sure.
Right.
So are you concerned at all about the state of commercial real estate, meaning the tenants themselves in this ever-growing new world that keeps changing on a dime?
Yeah, I definitely am. I think if you're unconcerned, you're probably hiding. I'm not overly concerned. So this is not 2008. 2008 was a very unique time. Lending, first of all, the cost of construction was significantly lower. Real estate is supply and demand at its most basic form. Now that's oversimplified, right? It's dependent on the market, dependent on the product type, dependent on a lot of different things. But at its core, it's supply and demand. In 2008, cost of construction and the supply for single-family homes, even commercial real estate, was significantly higher than it is today. So the supply, living here in San Diego, in the news for past decade has been a shortage of single-family homes and multifamily apartments, and the supply here is just constrained. And that's not just San Diego. That's a lot of markets around the country because the cost of construction has risen. Now, what's concerning is this short period of time. So really let me explain the difference in my mind between 2008 and today. Lending today is regulated. I think it's not easy to go out there and necessarily get a loan, which is good, right? In 2008, anybody could get a loan. You had a pulse, you were alive. Even if you were dead, you might have been able to get a loan.
I legitimately got a loan while I was in law school for 110% of the value of the house.
There you go.
They gave me money in a house.
Yeah.
So I had a part-time job.
That is not where we are today from lending standards. The supply is vastly different than it was in 2008. So I do not think we're going to have a crash. There is definitely already a correction in prices in both commercial real estate and even in some markets, residential real estate. But it's really driven by interest rates right now and inflation, and making sure that, so the values of commercial real estate and a lot of apartments may have dipped 10% in a market. But you don't have to realize that dip unless you sell the property. So right now, these assets we have are still cash flowing, right? They may not be valued as highly as they were a year ago, but unless you have a loan maturity, like in the next 24 months, or you have a variable loan where the interest rate, has the debt service is much higher now, unless you're forced to sell during this period, I think you're going to be fine. And it's really just making sure you hold and manage correctly until the end of 2024, 2025. But we're not going to see a crash like we did. There already has been a correction in prices in commercial real estate. So if you're selling something today versus 12 months ago, you're going to be selling it at a lower value. So a lot of sellers or a lot of people aren't selling. For every 10 apartment deals that we would look at a year ago, there's one today. So people are just kind of holding and waiting and hoping that interest rates come down. So temporarily there is a blip. And if there's certain factors working against you, you have a variable loan, you have a maturity, that could be kind of trying for you right now, but it's very different from, an all-out crash like we saw in 2008.
Sure. And then for those who are anxious to get into real estate, maybe they have one or two properties, but they're looking for more, is now not a good time to be buying?
I would say now is going to be a little tougher time to buy real estate. This is something my business partner was on a call with Blackstone, who is one of the largest asset managers in the world. And what was interesting is one of the acquisition directors over there said, we are in the business of buying real estate, not losing deals. And if you own real estate long-term and you manage it the right way, you're always going to do well, even if you overpay for the real estate. Now, I'm going to be very cognizant here. Mom and pop doing their first deal is not Blackstone. Blackstone has longer, 5, 7, 10-year hold times. So they can make the right decision of when to sell. But the premise, I think, is important. If you're going to buy and hold real estate, if you can find a good deal right now at a good price and it cash flows, buy it, right? Even if the value were to dip 5%, 10% in the next year, let's say, you hold that for 3, 4, 5, as long as it's cash flowing. If you're buying something with negative cash flow, that's what happened in 2008. People started buying single-family homes. They had no positive monthly cash flow. And they were hoping the value was going to go up, and it did from 2005 to 2006 to 2007. But in 2008, the value went down. Well, you would have been fine if that property was cash flow. Like, we had a lot of rentals where the value was dropping of the asset, but we didn't have to realize that value because we weren't selling it. And so the cash flow was still positive. So we just said, let's not sell these properties. Let's just hold these. And I don't know if this is a year, 2 years, 3 years, before it rebounds. as long as you have cash flow. So when you're buying for cash flow, so it depends on what strategy you're using in real estate, but if you're buying for cash flow, and if the property cash flows from day one, and you can improve those cash flows with inflation, you've seen what's happened to the cost of rents over the past couple of years. They're going to continue to grow. That's a good investment.
Yep.
And it will be an even better investment at some point 2 or 3 years from now. Now, if you're fixing and flipping properties, that's where you have to be a little more conservative. You have to buy a little bit lower today, realizing you're going to be selling probably in 6 months. And so as long as the numbers pencil, you can still buy right. But I would be more cautious for sure today.
So last question on that. I had Jimmy Rex on the show, and he gave our listeners a great piece of advice. And he said, if you're buying for rent, for cash flow, for every $100,000 of purchase price, make $100.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's stay the hell away.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, or do you have a variation of that for anyone listening who wants to buy, hold, and rent, what would be your criteria in today's market?
I think that's an excellent criteria. Anytime you're making a $100 rent increase on a $100,000 purchase from a cash flow standpoint, single family, I think it's great advice. We always had a formula when it comes. I'll share a formula on the fix and flip side, since we talked a little bit about rental. We have a formula. A lot of people, when they get into fix and flip, which is buy, renovate, resell the property, there's a difference between doing $200,000 of construction on a single family house and $30,000. The risk for a $200,000 construction budget is significantly higher than one that's $30,000. It's hard to budget something at $30,000 and then spend $60,000, right, on the renovate. It really is difficult, but it's very easy on a $200,000 renovation budget to go over budget by $50,000, $60,000. So our formula has always been, for every rehab dollar that you put in, you want to see 50 cents in profit. So for example, if I do a $50,000 renovation budget, I shouldn't be doing that deal unless I can make 25 grand
profit. So 75 grand back on my 50.
Yeah. So I want to see, if I put in $50,000 in construction, I want to see 50 cents for every dollar in construction. What this does is it factors in the risk, because if I'm doing a $50,000 construction project and you're doing a $100,000 construction project, or vice versa, you're taking on more risk. You shouldn't be doing that deal to make 25 grand.
Yep.
Right? You should be doing that deal to make 50 grand or more. So we would underwrite deals based on the construction cost and wanting to see about 50 cents in profit. Now, not to say every deal we did we hit that number. But if your number escalates, you're more likely to have a profitable deal, because I see a lot of people who do like a $300,000 construction project underwriting to project to make 30 grand. Well, that 30 grand can get eaten up very quickly on that size of a budget. So your risk in fix and flip is really based on the size of your construction budget. That's where your risk comes in. Even, the purchase value does matter. There was $1 million purchase versus a $200,000 purchase. Well, that $1 million purchase has more risk. But the real risk, because you're borrowing a lot of money, from individuals or from banks, is really based on the construction. And so I see a lot of people who are starting out making mistakes where they just have too large of a construction budget and too small of a profit center. Because 30 grand sounds nice, whether you're doing 50 grand in work or 200 grand in work. It sounds nice, but 200 grand in work, that 30 grand get eaten up really quick.
Yep.
Right. On a smaller deal, less likely. So I always tell, if I were advising my son, don't do a fix and flip that has a construction budget bigger than 50,000 on your first deal. Like, don't do it. You can't do a $200,000 project, your first deal, and expect to not have bumps and bruises along the way. Do something small, right? Do a condo that has a $25,000 budget. Learn. You got to learn how to hire the contractors, fire the contractors. You got to learn how to manage the project. Do that on something that just needs the kitchen and the bath replaced, not the roof, the tile, the landscaping. Do something small and then venture into something big. And so we see it all the time, because we teach classes where someone goes, I got this $2 million house. If I do $1 million in work, I can sell this thing for $4.5 million. Don't do it. Even don't get greedy on your first deal. Get a single, get some experience, then do another single, then do another single, then work your way up to a double. Don't go for a home run. There'll be plenty of home runs in your life if you hit a bunch of singles.
I think that's the best advice in any industry. Kaizen your way, get 1% better, grow. And I think Tony Gwynn used to say, I swing for singles and sometimes the ball just goes over the fence.
Yeah, that's a great quote. I like
yes,
that.
And it works so well. And Than, I could sit here and pick your brain all day. I'm sure the audience would love it. So we'll have to have you back on the show for a repeat. And for those listening, if you are interested in real estate or you just want to learn because you're not going to ever be an investor, but we all will eventually want to own our own personal real estate. And as you said, some people learn and then they rehab their own house. You can learn how to buy right. You can learn how to buy, flip, and sell, or buy, rehab, and flip, buy, hold, and rent. There's so many different ways to participate in the real estate sector. I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from FortuneBuilders. I'm a student of yours. I recommend everybody reach out to Than and go to FortuneBuilders.com, learn about what he's doing. He speaks on stages around the world. He's also got an incredible nonprofit, which we didn't really get to spend much time in today, so we'll have to do it on the next one. But Than is the definition of how success works. He has shown it across his entire lifespan, and it's a formula. You heard him consistently going back to that formula and what he focused on, and him and his partners. So I want to thank you, Than, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to invite all of you to please go follow Than, FortuneBuilders, and if you have questions, reach out to his team. You know, the education business is smaller, but it's still there, and we can all learn together.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, first I want to thank all of you for tuning in. And if you guys haven't heard about my new book, Relationship Bank Account, click the link in the show notes or search the title on Amazon. This book is packed with all my secrets to success in both relationships and life. Make sure to pick up a copy, and if the book helps you on your journey, let us know by leaving a review. I appreciate all of you and can't wait to see you on the next one.